So we've got the new 2025 model. This is a Senville unit with the R454B refrigerant. This just came in. If you've never ordered one before, this is how they usually come in a pallet, saran wrapped. So we're going to make a video of what's different, what's changed, what hasn't changed between this and the last model. I'm curious to see. Out of the gate, we've got some new model designations. The last one was 18 HFMOB. That's MOA now, and the heads used to be Senna 09HF-IQ. This is IAA. So this is an 18 dual zone with 2 9s I ordered. I'm going to install here. One difference I know of is that the multi-zones have one additional port, I believe, on each model. So the 18 used to just be a dual. I think this one's going to be a 3-zone, and they have one new smaller size head available, a 6,000 BTU head, whereas before they just had a 9, 12, 18, 24, and 33 size. And one other change I've heard of, we'll get more into it, but I think the 6, 9, and 12 are all the same 1/4 and 3/8 copper line set size. So we'll get unboxing this and compare and contrast and get this installed and see if it's just a few minor changes with the new compressor and some different sensors now, or if there's some more significant changes. This is the accessory box they supply you with. It looks like this is going to be the same exact stuff. The communication wire and the copper. Looks pretty similar. Give you some UV tape. Wall penetration tube. Some drain tubing. And it looks like the communication wire is the same. Also, this 14.4, which is good. We'll go check out the head now and inspect it. So looking pretty similar and similar size so far. Plenty more labeling on here with some more info. We'll take all this plastic off. It came in these styrofoam holsters. Remote controls in there, as well as the template batteries, and warranty card and manual are in there, just like there was in the outdoor unit. So start breaking this down and lay it side by side with the previous model and see what's changed. This is the new compared to the previous 410A model. Very similar, same exact dimensions, body. I'm imagining there's just a few more sensors, leak detectors, and maybe a different circuit board in there. The remote controls, which also come in the bag with the paperwork, look slightly different. Don't know if those are compatible with the different models. Looks like the same exact Wi-Fi thumb drive kit. So we'll start with throwing that in and looking at some of the other components. So these come with a QR sticker. I like to throw them usually down around right here where they're easily accessible depending on how you install the thing, but that should be able to scan easily there with the phone when you go to pair it. This Wi-Fi thumb drive hooks up right in here. That looks a little different. I'm not sure if that's where the leak detector is. Here's your thumb drive. I usually face the QR code out. Now that's in. Slide back in to the right. Make sure these wires are tucked back into where they were, or it won't close properly. One screw back in. So older version 410A. I kind of look at the differences here. Looks remarkably similar aside from an extra board up here and a leak detector down by the fan wheel. Take a look at this new unit, but once you pop these two screws, this is how this lower thread pops out. This can come out by kind of squeeze the top. These two tabs come out. I already showed you this part. Have a look. So all this looks the same. Sensors. It's got this new circuit board up here. If you go back and look at this one, all it's the same besides this. And this has a wire that comes, and there's one extra black connector here that goes into this board, and then it also splices down to this new unit, which I'm assuming is the leak detector unit. It's got one screw. There's also a connector here that comes out, but that's exactly the same as this unit. So most all the parts are the same. Looks like they just threw a few new sensors in. But once you have these two screws out and this fan shroud out, this whole lower assembly, these lock tabs undo. And there's a fan connector. This motor has a wire that needs to be disconnected. This one here. Which is this blue connector on the board. Be a little tricky to pop out, but so that's the inner damper fan motor, and then there's one larger wire, which is the fan motor itself. This bigger one that goes to this white connector up here. Pop that one out as well. So once those are out, this whole thing, I forgot the drain tube here. There's a little locking clip right here, but if you swivel it, you can pop this drain tube off as well and kind of tuck it out of the way. So now this whole lower end will just kind of rock out, and there's a little finesse to it, but kind of rock it back and forth a little bit, and then gently kind of rock it, maybe pulling the bottom up a bit more. The fan wheel kind of contacts the coil in there. So those are all the same parts as well to the prior model. Coil, everything else looks the same in there. So it's looking like just that one sensor and board they added. And then got a little more detail up here, which is nice, and some error codes listed on there that the other unit doesn't have, which is convenient. So now we'll get this back together, and I'm gonna just inspect it and wire it up, ready to install it. So I've got everything back together. As far as I can tell, everything's basically the same aside from this sensor and the other board so far. Now we're going to get things ready to install the thing. I usually take this little holster out. I like to pre-wire the head before I install it. It makes the install a little easier if you know how long the line set / communication wire is going to be. I like to do that prior. So from the factory it comes with this connector, which you don't need. I think that's just for testing it, or however they ran it at the factory. So that's a throwaway. You'll notice this other wire hanging out. I think that's for the wired remote controller thermostat. So just tuck this back up in there. Don't need it. New sensors back in place. I pop this little tab out. That's where the communication wire feeds through. Don't back these screws out all the way, just enough to get the fork slid out, because they will come out and they will be lost. So I'm going to keep it as is, close this hood and flip it over. So this is where your bracket's at. It's just got one screw, the wall mount bracket. So we'll take this out and put it to the side. If at all possible, I like to install these with the exit point on the right side of the unit. It's got about a 18-inch or 16-inch or so pigtail on it. That makes sure that the connection's going to wind up outside rather than having to be behind the unit, which is a little more work. And then in the future, if you need to ever access that flare, if it's leaking, it's just right outside where the unit exits the house, which is easier to deal with. And the drain tube from the factory comes on the right side. You can hook it up on the left side. There's a little plug there if you wanted to swap sides, but I like to keep this all going out the right side if possible. Kind of swing this out carefully. From the factory, they come pre-charged with nitrogen. And so once you loosen these caps, you should hear some pressure being released. If you don't hear anything, that's not good. That means the unit may have been damaged or developed a leak. So something to check. You want to make sure there's some nitrogen in there still from the factory. So I showed you that. I'm just going to swivel it back. Now that we think this unit's looking pretty good, no damage or anything. This little clamp keeps things in place, especially if you were to run an exit out the left side of the unit. And it also acts as a kickstand on the bracket. So once the unit's hung up on the bracket, you can swivel this out and the unit will stay kicked out so you can access the piping and whatnot behind. So I think I misspoke in the previous video, but same communication wire. It's this 4/16 gauge communication wire. It comes with two ends. This one's a 25-footer. I know this run's going to be about 20 feet, so I used a 25-foot. We're going to hook the end with the fork terminals into the head. The other end's going to get cut to length. Slide these little plastic sleeves up, and usually have this on a better workbench, but I'm just doing this video quickly to show. But I'll usually have the head overhanging a table of some sort, so I can easily feed this wire into that knockout. But feed it up on here. I usually do red, black, white, 1, 2, 3. Whatever color scheme you do, just make sure that's what's getting matched at the outdoor unit, or it's not going to work properly. Red, black, white, 1, 2, 3. Make sure they're nice and torqued properly. Alright, I saved you from me farting around with this, but wires in, as you can see, ground's in. Put that clamp in. Wires traveling down out the back. Make sure all these little wires are in their place into the tabs up here as well. If they're not, the hood pieces aren't going to want to close properly. So that's all good. We'll get the electrical panel back on. It's got those 2 tabs up at the top. You kind of squeeze in the middle there to bend it in, and then that just shuts. That's like a manual button if you lose the remote, if you want to be able to turn the unit on without a remote. Get this lower clip back in now. It's got these little tabs on it, so it needs to get worked in just the right way to neatly come together. So kind of start at one end. Certainly need a couple hands to do that. Work your way down the middle. You can start these 2 screws, 2 Phillips screws. Again, work it, make sure everything's kind of locking into place there. Then go ahead and finish tightening. Close the hood. I like to press in the middle first and then the edges. It's another thing. It takes a little finesse first time you've done it to make sure it's all looking neat. I'm going to swivel this out again. Now that the communication wire is in place, this is another unnecessary step, but I like to kind of bundle the drain tube, the copper piping, and the communication wire together. I'll throw a couple little pieces of tape to get it started. Also, probably not a bad idea to leave a little slack up in here on this communication wire. Maybe do a little loop in case you ever have to move it around or need slack for whatever reason. I do this just because it makes it easier to slide through the wall penetration, so nothing's getting hung up between the wire and the tubing and the drain hose. And then I'll wrap it with some of this UV tape they supply. Kind of do a tight, somewhat tight wrap on everything. And then I'll stop it about right there, a few inches away from where the connections are going to get made up. And then that'll be able to slide once we get the wall bracket in and the wall penetration ready to go. This will just slide right in and click right into the wall bracket with minimal fuss.